Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second session on the More Than Just a Game 2021 Presents. We started last week with a session themed retrospective. We looked at the past 12 months and the focus that was on the video game industry. That was literally everywhere. Video games saved the day in the end. They kept us together, they kept us sane. But despite of all the positive aspects they brought to our lives, they were also at the center of legal and regulatory attention. And this week, we continue with our interrogation of the video game industry, and we are looking ahead. We are looking at what the next 5 years can possibly bring, and what can we expect. The focus from reality to perception, the focus on total immersion in video games. They will be the industry that will lead and change the way that we see ourselves, others, and our place in the world. And the focus on today's session will be on how can we harness the power of interactive entertainment industry and drive a change for a better digital future for us all. And to do that, we have an amazing panel here tonight with us that will share their predictions for the video game industry for the next couple of years going ahead. So I'm so pleased and happy to welcome here Tamara Sakolchyk, Scott Kelly, Tom Hamer, and Ben Golant tonight. Tamara is the head of business and legal at Wargaming, and in her everyday tasks, she deals with all sorts of issues surrounding game development and publishing. On an academic side, Tamara is a guest lecturer at the High School of Economics in Moscow, and she's also one of the organizers of the Legal Challenge taking place annually under an umbrella of Games Industry Law Summit. In her rare free time, Tamara disguises herself as King Boo and competes with her friends for the title of the best Mario Kart player. Next, we have Scott Kelly. Scott is an attorney with Banner Witcoff in the US, and he mainly focuses his practice on patent prosecution and counseling. He frequently speaks about intellectual property law at video game and interactive entertainment conferences, and writes on the impact of IP law on the business of video games. He serves as chair for the Digital Games and New Media Committee of the American Bar Association's Intellectual Property Law section. He is an assistant editor at patentarcade.com and a contributing author to the ABA Legal Guide to Video Game Development, the second edition, published in 2016. Moving on to Tom Hamer, who is a European patent attorney based in Silicon Valley. He specializes in software and AI patents and keeps an eye on patent filing data in the video game space to spot industry trends. Tom enjoys helping his clients to push the boundaries of the patent system and obtain commercially useful protection. And this drive has naturally led him to the intersection of his two passions, video games and patents. He regularly speaks on IP issues associated with video games, alongside with associated tech such as AI, computer hardware, and tactile feedback. And throughout the past lockdowns, and hopefully the last lockdowns as well, Tom wished he had played a lot more Ring Fit Adventure and a lot less Super Smash Bros. And last but not least is Ben Golant, who is here tonight with us representing the Georgetown University Law Center, where he is an adjunct professor, and he's been teaching video game law for the past 4 years. Before that role, he was a visiting professor at Catholic University of America's Law School, where he focused his teaching on telecom and technology policy. In his day job, Ben works on matters involving intellectual property, free speech, health and research, and e-commerce at the Entertainment Software Association in Washington, DC. Thank you all for being here tonight. I can't wait for this amazing event. And we will open with our panelists spending a couple of minutes presenting their predictions for the video game industry to you. And I will open the floor with Tamara and her predictions. Tamara, to you.
Thank you very much, Michaela. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to speak during this panel. It's a great honor for me, and good evening to the participants. Good morning to some of you, because I see that there are some familiar faces in the participants. So I hope you will enjoy this session as much as we do. Well, I have a privilege to speak first. Probably this is because this way I will not be intimidated by the speakers that will go after me. So I'm happy to share a few humble thoughts on the matter that I have. And please feel free to jump with the questions. I will be very happy to address all of them. So to begin with, I think that it is quite difficult to predict what is going to happen in the next 5 years, as you, Michaela, mentioned in the beginning, because we don't even know what's going to be happening tomorrow in this world. But what is probably obvious, and this is the hope that I personally have, is that the pandemic will be over sometime soon, and we will come to the next stage of the development of this world, which is the post-pandemic world. And I guess that this world will bring new challenges to the video game industry and to the entertainment industry in general. So the challenge that I see as the major one is that the players that were together with us during these difficult times will probably get their life back, and it's going to be harder and harder to maintain them as the players. And the task of gaining new players will be even more difficult. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the companies will be handling this and how they will be dealing with that. My prediction is that very soon we will see development of new methods of attraction of new players. So the marketing tools that are currently being used by generally by entertainment companies, they will grow and develop, and they will allow the companies to provide the players and the users with a completely and totally immersive world that someone might call metaverse or some other term, where the user will be able to stay, well, basically forever. So it's going to be a totally new world, offering you both digital and real world possibilities. So it's going to be a kind of combination of both. Also, speaking about monetization, we will definitely see the rise in the new monetization mechanics. And I am not speaking about loot boxes here anymore. I think that this is something that we will hopefully leave in the past, and the development in this sphere will continue. At the same time, I believe that the regulators will pick up, and the scrutiny on their side and policing the game companies and entertainment companies will also come to the new level. So we will definitely see stricter regulations in the spheres of minors, privacy, advertising. So everything that concerns and surrounds e-commerce, games, other entertaining activities. If to touch upon very briefly the technology underlying video games industry, in my opinion, we will definitely see a rise in the AI and AR technology. Machine learning will be there, notwithstanding the fact that it kind of competes with the privacy regulations, and it's going to be interesting to see in which direction this is going to. Also, there are a number of issues concerning the copyrightable materials produced by AI that probably will be solved at some point, either by the judiciary or by lawmakers. So fascinating times are ahead of us if we speak about the AI technology. Another technology that might also bring some new potential and new development in the video games industry is probably the blockchain. And here I'm not speaking only about the blockchain as such and blockchain-based game, but also the new features that become more and more popular and that are getting bigger hype than anything else, like NFTs, for example. We will see where it all goes to. In my opinion, we will definitely see a number of cases of in-game items being available as NFTs. But also, I believe that the number of games based on blockchain and based on NFTs will increase as well. And last but not least, we are all aware of the current situation on the market, and the market is already very heavily saturated with big players and also with some minor players. And I guess, this is really my wild guess, is that the trend in this regard will be that the new companies, the new small video game companies, they will continue to, being born, and they will, some of them continue to die, but at the same time, big publishers and big companies, they continue to grow. And I think that the competition for the users in this sphere in the next 5 years or so will be about providing the user an ever immersive experience on the one hand, but also offering the users and being not only user-friendly, but also being eco-friendly and having all other considerations in place as well. So this is those are my 5 cents, maybe 50 cents. Thank you very much for attention. I think I will give the floor to Scott.
Well, thank you very much, Tamara, and thank you to Michaela, Michaela and Gaetano for the invitation to speak today. I don't have 5 cents or 50 cents, but I've got 2 cents to share. Two of the trends that I see kind of looking forward in the games industry and the technology that we're going to see here are kind of a healthy relationship between patents and innovation in VR. And then, as Tamara noted, sort of an increase in the role of AI in game design, maybe even replacing humans. So looking at VR, I mean, certainly virtual reality is something that people have wanted for a long time, and they've dreamed about for a long time, and they've just kind of thought about what it would look like for a long time. The thing is, we couldn't do it. We didn't have displays that were high enough resolution for you to be able to see and believe that you were in this world. We didn't have computers that were powerful enough to drive these experiences and track everything you're doing, but that didn't stop people from trying to figure it out. And so the long development path for VR over the last 30 years means that there was a lot published, there were a lot of patent applications on kind of things that might work. And they didn't, we know that they didn't work. I wasn't really playing that much VR 10 years ago because it was kind of terrible, but now it's awesome. And in doing that, they solved, the companies involved have solved a lot of long, hard problems, but it's not the scenario where VR wasn't a thing just recently. And so I think we're actually gearing up towards kind of a healthy patent environment where the innovations that are powering the VR revolution are really fairly being patented on sort of the particular innovation underlying it and not like the big picture. So all the big picture stuff on VR, I think, is already out there. And so the patents are coming in and rewarding kind of the special techniques that get you to that final spot. And I think that's a really healthy space for patents, as opposed to what we've seen in some other areas of software where people just kind of had an idea and didn't really get it to the fully baked stage and got patents on it. So I'm optimistic about patents in VR, but then the pessimist in me sort of sees a brewing patent war there. And I think that the smartphone patent wars have kind of been playing out. They're still simmering, but are sort of going their ways. I do think we could see some big intellectual property disputes in the VR space. The other trend that I see is on the patent side, actually, my fellow panelist, Tom, and I have had a lot of discussions about this, but in the patent world, we're now sort of worldwide looking at this issue of whether or not an artificial intelligence can ever be considered the inventor of a new technology, or if, you know, the person that turned it on, the person that programmed it should be the inventor and the AI is just a tool. But, and it's a fascinating issue. I think it's one that the law is kind of clear on, but that it does raise a lot of questions about, should we let AIs be inventors? And what should we do with those inventions? But this applies to the not just the engineering side, but also the creative space. Certainly we've seen AIs that create art and music. And in order to do that, they need to sort of iterate over the space and generate a whole bunch of art that's really terrible. And they need some way to decide, is this good or not? And we're actually aware of a couple AIs that make games. There's an AI sort of publicly available on the web called Angelina that generates games, and some of them are really bad, but some of them are games. And so I think it's really interesting to see where this would go. I mean, procedural generation has been a thing in games for a very long time. You know, I'm reminded of Diablo 2 as it gets its remaster. But all of those are rules that somebody put in it and said, this is what I want a level to look like. This is what makes a fun level. And I think there's a really big question of, can an AI make a good game? Can they recognize what is fun? And to sort of keep up with my counterpoint, kind of on the optimist side, yeah, maybe a game can make, an AI can make a really fun level. But to go to Tamara's point about keeping users and attracting users, there could be kind of a nefarious side here where the AIs find the way to really like press our buttons in just the right way to get us a little more hooked, a little more microtransactions and that sort of thing. So certainly I think AI is going to be a really big part of the future here. And I'll toss it to Tom then.
Excellent, thank you very much. So yes, I'm a European patent attorney specializing in software, AI. It goes without saying that I love a good video game patent. So here's some of my predictions. It's worth saying that one of the things that I like to do, which I find generally quite interesting in lots of technologies, but particularly in the video game space, is looking at patent classification codes and the number of applications being filed in particular technical areas and trying to use that to spot trends. And once you do that, you can kind of do some crystal ball gazing and use these trends to see, okay, which technologies is the industry investing in, and can you use that information to make sensible predictions? And it turns out that I think you can. So I don't think it would be any surprise to suggest that increased immersion is going to be a big deal of the coming few years. And that's borne out by the patent filing data. So there are particular kind of areas. So there are classification codes, we've seen an explosion in particularly European patent applications filed under the code games which make use of sensors worn by the player, for example, heartbeat or leg activity. We've similarly seen an explosion in applications filed under game outputs which affect a player's ambient conditions, for example, vibrating player seats, activating scent dispensers, affecting temperature in a kind of like gamer's ambient environment. And actually, I find the scent dispenser one particularly interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen, but there's a multi-sensory VR mask that I think you can buy nowadays by a company called Feel Real. And they sell aroma kits that come with a big VR mask, so you can walk around a VR environment or game and kind of like experience the scent or the aroma of the game. They sell a Skyrim compatible aroma kit, which claims to be able to tell you what a dragon smells like. So that's quite exciting for the future. Clearly, AI as well will play a much bigger role in not only the generation, but also the kind of like adaptive modification on the fly of video games based on player actions, not just your actions, but the whole bank of this whole wealth of data gathered by lots of players as they play the game. This will help, I guess, autonomously and in real time adapt games, which is quite exciting. So you might end up playing a video game which is almost like being generated for you based on your actions, your interests. And again, this kind of like suggestion, this trend is borne out by the patent data. Lots and lots of applications being filed under the classification code, generating or modifying game content before or during execution of a game program. So that applications in that space have tripled over the last few years, which is quite exciting. last one there, I think one of the things you can do as well, and there are lots and lots and lots of flaws in this approach, which we can talk about, but it's arguably useful in some way to kind of look at the number of female inventors on video game patents or in other technical fields and kind of see if you can spot trends there, you know? Is the number of female inventors increasing? Does that suggest an increase in the number of female game developers? I've commissioned a report. Again, it's flawed in lots of ways because you make assumptions basically based on whether people are female or male or whatever based on their names. It's flawed, but tentatively, the report I commissioned suggests that things are getting better. More women are becoming game developers or certainly being named on patent applications. And I think this kind of positive change is going to drive a positive change in the industry. And hey, that's not only something which is clearly the right thing to do, but it's also going to help generate increased revenue if these games are going to be appealing to a wider audience base. It's just generally positive across the board. And this last point, it is nice as an attorney, as a lawyer, you know, normally you're constrained within having to make sensible recommendations to clients based on things that you really believe or that are based on sensible reasons. But this last one, just some speculation for you, just some wild speculation. Could the video game space host the next big patent war? It kind of plays into what Scott was saying about the VR space. But, you know, video game industry, it's growing in revenue. The rate at which video game patents are being filed is increasing as well. The big players are, to use this kind of inflammatory, exciting language, are stockpiling patents. Hopefully Scott will talk about the Nemesis patent granted recently. Could this usher in a new age of people filing lots of patent applications related to gameplay mechanics? And could we see this new era of lots of big ticket patent litigation in the future, similar to the smartphone wars of a good few years ago now? I think the answer might be no, but I'd love to talk about it if we get time. Thanks. And now I'll pass over to the next speaker. I think it's you, Ben.
Thank you. This is an honor and a privilege to be here today. I've always looked forward to this more than just a game conference. I've always wanted to get to London. So doing it virtually is really great. And I appreciate all the efforts on the part of our hosts to get me acclimated to this. So first of all, we will talk a little bit about these 7 bullet points, but I want to reach on back. Our other guests had said that they find trend lines in patent applications, which is a great source. Same could be said with trademark applications as well. But for me, when I look at things, I look at what's happening in Congress and the states in terms of legislation. That's one indicator, as well as what the administration is looking for. News articles are a great source of what possibly could happen in the next 5 to 10 years. I use a service called FeedSpot, which aggregates about 150 to 200 different trade publications in the video game space. And I read that constantly throughout the day, like a stock ticker taper. And that's really helpful for me to find out what the journalist is speaking about. Then job listings is also another place I've seen. If you can see what companies in the tech space, including video games, who they're hiring or looking to hire, you'll see that there's a lot of hints about what that company is going to go into or is concerned about. For example, I've seen tons of jobs for trust and safety and content moderation and privacy. So that certainly gives you a clue of what people are concerned about. Then I look for student interest. So my students in my class for the past couple of years have been pretty prescient in terms of predicting what the future may hold. So I look at them because they're way much younger than me and way smarter than me. And so they tell me what they think is a cool thing. And this year, for example, we had classes and sessions and papers on everything regarding legality of private servers, foreign game protection and DMCA, digital first sale, positive gaming, what to do about how game technology like VR can help save the performing arts. And so those are kind of keys I see, like how to predict the future. And then of course, reading law reviews like our esteemed hosts have published, IELR. It's been very helpful for me to find out what academics are thinking. And so that brings it all around. So with that, let me talk about some of these predictions. So time being limited, I'm going to focus in on games as a destination, games as experience, and then games for change. So for games for a destination, what I meant by that is that whilst in the past 30 years, people play games for entertainment, and they play the games with their friends and family, and that's it. You know, it's pretty much cordoned off in that. But now what we have are games in an online environment. So we've seen an exponential growth in what we currently call the metaverse, which is the way of describing what games like Minecraft and Roblox and Animal Crossing and Fortnite are doing, where you go into a game not only to play, and not only to interact with friends and family, but also to watch concerts, watch movies, watch TV shows, watch previews, see an ad. So it's sort of a virtual world, if you will, a Second Life 9.0. So the growth of the metaverse will only increase, and really important in this context is IP licensing, because you probably have seen, if you play Fortnite, and I've played in the past, you'll see characters from the DC Comics, Marvel Comics, from the movies, and all these are really critical because it drums up a lot of energy and excitement among the player base. But those IP licensing contracts are critical, and they're complex. So as the virtual worlds grow exponentially, so too I see will, with regard to how to get that valuable IP protected and also transliterated into another kind of work. Games of experience, that's number 2 on my list, is what most of the people here on the panel have said so far. Virtual reality is really kicking into overdrive. But also with that, haptics, which is sort of like, for example, you wear a vest and you can feel a zombie scratch in a game, or you wear a pair of boots and you slog through the mud in Call of Duty. Those kind of experiences where you're completely immersed with your VR headset, as well as what you're wearing, and well as with your haptic controller, will all bring it together. And then, of course, we don't know what the future may hold in terms of what else you can do. You can remember, if you will, back in the 70s, there was something called Sensorround. So you went to see a movie like Earthquake or Towering Inferno, not to date myself, and the theater shook, right? It gave you that level, that 4th level experience besides seeing, hearing, and experiencing the movie. And I'm thinking that the same thing will be happening with video games, that it could be such a environmental surround and experience that you will forget that you're even in the real world. And number 6 on the list, I'll talk about that for a change. So we've seen in the past, the video game industry has harnessed its global reach to engage players in societal causes. And you probably had heard about this last week. So for example, climate change in the UN, there is the Playing for the Planet initiative. For the pandemic response, the Play a Part Together campaign. And in the UK, the mental health was really critical in the Safe in Our World campaign. And I think this Games for Good will only increase in the future, because if you think now, based on numbers, there are 3 billion gamers or players, if you will. And if it continues to grow that path onward, and all indications say that it will, you'll see it's a perfect audience to get people engaged in social causes. And that's a real good thing, because it not only helps out people, but it helps out the industry by growing and touching more lives. And I just want to add that it's not only those 3 campaigns, but I've seen a lot of stories, for example, on particular video game that was developed to treat ADD, or Assassin's Creed's blueprints were helped to rebuild the Notre Dame Cathedral, or some other Assassin's Creed games help with education in Greek mythology. So all these games come together, and they're a perfect audience to help teachers, to help social scientists, to help everybody who plays games interact with the world. It's truly the core of social experience. And with that, I will turn it over to our hosts, and I'll be happy to answer more questions on those topics and themes as we go forward.
Thank you so much, everyone, for these amazing insights into what the future holds for not just the video game industry, but for all of us. When I listen to your predictions and your comments, I kind of have a feeling that as we are creating perhaps this one giant metaverse that cyberspace will become for all of us, just to exist. There might not even be a distinction between physical or digital. It might not even be lots of different games. It just might be one space that we will inhabit. I kind of wonder, what space are we going to build? What kind of universe, what kind of experience, what kind of destination are we thriving to create? And how can we decide what are the values that will drive that development? And how can we perhaps influence it or determine how to go forward? And another comment that I had, and it's not necessarily a question, more sort of an observation. I'm getting the windows cleaned. I'll see outside, finally. And that was the use and reliance and integration of AI, both as a tool in terms of game development and game management, but also AI as creator and innovator. And I'm wondering, as we are focusing on this sort of total immersion and individualized perception and exploring all the different senses of the human players, that is one thing that machines do not have. They do not have senses. They do not perceive the world as users do. And so if we are relying on AI technology so much, again, what kind of games are they going to help us build, or build themselves altogether? As Scott mentioned, can AI make games that are fun? And perhaps that might just not be the only measures. What kind of games are they going to make if they are not perceiving the world the same way as human users do? And I'm just going to open the floor to all of you and any of you who'd like to pick up on that, if you have any comments.
I'm happy to start with that, and I'll start with kind of the end of your comment about the AI creating games. Not to kind of minimize the role of the technology here, but I think a little bit analogous is what we saw in the mobile app boom. So once game development tools became very widely available, and anybody could make a game, and it didn't take a whole team to do it, we saw an explosion of games and people trying new things, but also a lot of people trying old things and just putting their own touch on it, or not putting their own touch on it. The copyright lawyers can appreciate that part. So in a way, democratizing game development to just open it up to anybody is kind of like machine learning, is kind of like an AI making a game, because that's how AI works. It iterates over a lot of different opportunities, tests them, looks at what worked and what didn't, and iterates again. So I think we can kind of look a little bit at that boom to predict how AI generated games might look, and I think initially you'll see a lot of things that look like what's already come before. But the genius of what makes AI generation so interesting is that it could randomly stumble on something that's completely awesome. And so we could get something really fun that way. But I think we'll see just a lot of bad stuff first. And on the topic of bad stuff, I think the thing that I'm worried about, and this plays into your metaverse scenario, is that monetization is just such an important thing, because people make games to be expressive, but we're in business to make money. And so the desire to sort of build your game to make the most money is for a lot of people, motivating factor number one. And I think AI is going to be scarily good at that. And so I think, I'm not sure where the metaverse will go, but I suspect that part of the decisions underlying where it goes will be grounded in how can we make money off of this. And I think we could have a really awesome metaverse if it wasn't founded on how can we extract the most value from everybody, but that's not how business works. So I hope that there's a solution to that, and I'm curious what everybody else thinks.
I mean, I can jump in and make one quick comment if that's okay. First of all, Scott, well done for wearing the patent attorney uniform. We've both got the same shirt. That's a little joke for you there. In terms of AI making games, as I said, I look at patent classification codes and kind of trying to keep an eye on the industry in that way. One of the most exciting codes, I think, is this generating or modifying game content before or while executing the game program adaptively or by learning from player actions. Okay, so as you can expect, there's lots of AI techniques under this code. And it sounds quite exciting. Even the code name sounds quite exciting. But when you click through and look at it, a lot of the technology which has been invested in is essentially looking at player actions. And a lot of this can be things like using cameras focused on the player, using ambient microphones and all this kind of thing to kind of really observe the player. And this can be in a mobile game space or on a console or PC or wherever it might be, with the ultimate aim, not of making a better video game or improving user experience, actually of intelligently inserting adverts or kind of like in order to extract marketing data that can then be sold. So I agree that there's a line to walk, and I hope that as we go forward, we harness the power of AI to make better games, improve user experience. But I think there'll also be a lot of trying to better monetize things, insert adverts at an appropriate time, which would maximize the user's attention or whatever it might be. So there could be a lot of good things and a lot of bad things over the next 5 years as these kind of like game programs are autonomously adapted in real time based on real-time data from the player.
I was going to say, I'm sorry, Michaela, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of insert another comment there that links a little bit to what Tamara spoke about with regards to blockchain and NFTs. And that is maybe possible that we're going to shift the control or hand more control to the user in terms of the data and the content that they may either generate individually or together through interaction with the game, by allowing them to monetize that themselves by relying on blockchain and NFTs. As we've seen a couple of stories lately, for example, the YouTube video, Charlie Bit My Finger, sold for £500,000. Is that possibly a way forward? And I'm not sure whether it's a way forward in the right direction, but is that somehow we can rebalance the kind of status quo perhaps and allow the user to kind of get in to the monetization game and flip the scenario a little bit? I don't know, Tamara, if you want to.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I can comment on that with a great pleasure, actually. Well, first of all, I think that this is definitely is going to be a trend that the user content in the games will take more and more space. And this is a part of making the video game a fully immersed technology. And this is a part of creating this metaverse, because without bringing something into this metaverse, the whole idea of metaverse is kind of under question. But when we speak about monetization and giving the user a possibility to create something and then sell something, I don't really think that this is about NFTs, because still, if we speak about NFTs and the legal nature that is currently, the way how the legal community currently understands it, there is no ownership behind something that is being, sold as NFT. Video game companies, they tend to license their property, and the same concerns the user-generated content. It's not like the user has created something within the game and then he's able to sell this as an NFT because this is his property. Not at all. It's the other way around. It's something that is being licensed by the company to the user, and the user indeed can kind of resell it, but legally wise, this is not a resale. This is sub-licensing and down to the chain. So I personally don't think this model will change anytime soon. Perhaps if we speak about longer perspective, this change will come eventually, and the whole idea of metaverse will change. But as of the point where we stand now, I don't think so. And also the model of metaverse and the direction that it will take, in my opinion, largely depends on on whether it's going to be a centralized metaverse or decentralized metaverse. So depending on whether one company or just a few big players will take the space basically and just create something on their own, or they will allow other developers or other companies to join this metaverse, there can be multiple different scenarios also in terms of monetization and in-game sales.
Thank you so much. Ben, over to you.
Thank you. And I apologize for interfering with the conversation flow. But I just want to reach back to AI. And I've studied this matter a lot, and it's called moral panic. And most of you know what that means, that every time there's a new technology that's introduced into the marketplace or into society, people always have some sort of freak out. And that there's always like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? This is going to be terrible. It's going to be dystopic. It's going to be like the Terminator. But it's not going to be that way. I'm pretty optimistic about things. I mean, with regard to AI, I see it as an engine of creativity. It's a tool. The ultimate arbiters of what a game made are the development team, the screenwriters, the producers, the voice actors, the creators behind the scene. They're the ones in control. So AI has a lot of promise. I mean, for example, it could provide you new levels of a game on the fly based on how you played in the past. It could provide you personalization that if you find something hard or easy, it'll adjust it on the fly. So there are many different ways AI can be implemented into a game system, most of which have no harm to society or to replacing workers or anything like that. It's just a way of looking at it. I mean, imagine with moral panic, remember back when the telephone was first introduced in the US, in the world in the 1870s, there was a whole fear that now, oh my God, women will be able to talk to each other on the phone. And that would be such a big deal. The same goes with rock and roll. Remember with Elvis, like it would be the death of civilization because rock and roll was going to just turn people into juvenile delinquents. Or with video games and violence back in the early 1990s, is the downfall of how we see media and its media effects on kids. And none of those things happened. And the same thing with AI. People are saying it could lead to this, it could lead to that, but I say, let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Don't make harsh predictions and base policy around what could happen. Look at the facts on the ground, look at the evidence in the record and see how it's working now. So I just want to put those two ideas on the table there.
Thanks for your optimistic take on things. I think we need more of that. I wondered, with this increased focus again on immersion, perception, and personalization of the way we experience, and not just video games, but when video games become the destination, when video games become the space in which we live in, how is that going to impact on our understanding of reality? And will there be just one reality? Will there be just one truth, or that kind of concept, which perhaps is already quite fragile, but will it disintegrate even further if we will be able to perceive things very differently based on our own experience? If there's kind of like a constant feedback loop between the user and the environment, and depending on how we feel and what we've read, the kind of friends we have, the sort of things we buy online are all fed back into the digital environment and transform what we consume back. I wonder, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? We'll be able ever to talk about anything again, because we will have completely different understanding and perceptions of reality.
Well, on that point, and continuing on what I had said before, if the pandemic has showed us anything, is that games are good in terms of creating social connections. For those people who couldn't get out, you had the ability to talk to friends. for those people who are sick, there was an ability to help them see the world. And so the same thing will continue to be the same as it has been for last year, is that every step in the process of the video game industry evolution will increase the social context. And again, I see it as a good thing, because remember, there's a lot of shy people out there, a lot of introverts, a lot of people who are ill, a lot of people who are handicapped, and they look to games as a way of the great equalizer. No one can see what I look like. No one can tell me what my abilities are, but I'm able to make friends and make connections because of the games I play. And as I said, there are a number of games online that are positive and happy and friendly, like Animal Crossing. And so, I mean, if you saw it there, a number of universities had their graduations last year in Animal Crossing. People are getting married in Minecraft. There are concerts in all 4 platforms I mentioned. So I see it as the direction where people are going, and it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing.
Thanks, Ben. I don't know if any of you would like to add anything else to that. Otherwise, we have 2 questions from the audience, so we can move on to those, unless you have any further comment or observation.
I mean, I'll echo what Ben said about the optimism. I know that I sort of introduced some of the parade of horribles, but certainly there's so many opportunities here, and we shouldn't let, you know, what could go wrong and what could be the dystopian outcome, you know, stand in the way of us realizing the promise here. So certainly I'm very excited about what AI lets us do. I mean, it's amazing how much of a force multiplier it is. If you have one creative person, they can do amazing things when they sort of are working with the tools and the AIs that we have. And so I'm really looking forward to it. And I mean, it's hard not to sort of acknowledge the risks, but I would like to consider myself an optimist as well. So I for one welcome our machine overlords and hope that they're nice.
I guess I also quickly feel a need to walk back on some pessimism that I may have thrown on the table. I suspect that the future is bright for these technologies, and with the pandemic lockdowns and the shelter-in-place order here in California. So by the way, I'm based in California in the Silicon Valley, in part to do business development function and to network with people and meet people, which became pretty difficult during the pandemic, as you might imagine. But I've been doing most of my networking via the medium of Mario Kart. I've been doing a lot of business development and essentially meeting people in VR. I've been managing to excise in my house using VR. I mean, anyone who's ever played Beat Saber knows that it's possible to have a very fun game, which gives you a good workout. And so I've been playing Ring Fit and that sort of thing. So if things continue to progress in this direction of basically satisfying human needs, whether that be exercise, socialization, business, through this kind of like things that would traditionally be thought of as video games, will start to be more and more integrated into just our normal life, I think. And I'm really excited about it.
Thank you so much. I think that's what we need, the focus on the positive side. I'm going to quickly turn to the questions that we've got from the audience. One is on the Nemesis patent and game mechanics patents generally. And the question is whether these types of patents are vulnerable to challenge on the basis that they are too broad and just implement ideas in a gaming environment, similar to the recent World's Version Activision decision, or are there other issues with them, such as negative industry reaction to the Nemesis patent in particular? So that is one question. And another question is on free-to-play business model and whether that model is here to stay, or whether we are looking at moving to subscriptions or a completely new kind of monetization, perhaps invented by an AI, that we haven't even thought of yet. So let us open with the Nemesis patent and game mechanics patent generally. I'm going to leave it up to you whether all of you would like to share your opinions. Scott, would you like to lead on that?
Sure. Yeah, and I think that this is a great question that does tee into what Tom was also asking in his trends is, might we see a game patent war in the future? And so I think these all kind of play together. Looking kind of at industry trends, I think game companies have a long history of competing on creativity and execution. And so I actually think there is kind of a different culture in game companies versus other software companies where maybe they are competing more on functionality. I think game developers, game publishers are happy to compete on the merits of their creative expression. So I'm not quite as worried about a video game patent war. I think that we will see a lot of troll activity in that space, as we already are, but I don't see the tea leaves as a big brewing battle between major game companies. When you look at something like the Nemesis patent, I mean, that does come to us after several years. I mean, it's been 8 years now since the US just kind of slammed the door on, I mean, abstract ideas were never allowable, but Alice came in 2013 and really changed that, and gameplay patents got kind of tossed out with that. So a lot of my favorite video game patents are not patentable anymore. Nemesis does ring some bells in that area. It does kind of seem like, is this a gameplay patent? What's going on? I think it's important to note that the story there tells one of sort of them wearing down the patent office over many years and many back and forths. I think that they did sort of tie it to exactly how the game implements it. But yes, there's absolutely a question of, is that one broad? Is that vulnerable to these challenges? I don't see it as a sea change yet. We'll have to see if it ever gets tested. But as I said, I'm not sure that game companies are litigious in that direction. So we might not see that battle. So I'm not ready to call it a trend reversal yet. I want to see some more examples before we start making those predictions.
Thanks, Scott. Tom.
A super quick comment, just from, I completely agree with Scott, just from, I guess, from a European perspective, is that things like gameplay mechanics, difficult to patent in the US, even more difficult, if not bordering on impossible in most cases, to patent in Europe. So you might find this kind of asymmetry in terms of patent eligibility requirements, where gameplay mechanics can be patented, and perhaps, I guess Scott was saying that he doesn't see this as a sea change, but there could be a scenario where more and more companies start filing on these gameplay mechanics in the US. But I mean, it's notable that Warner Brothers didn't even attempt to file this Nemesis patent in Europe. So you might end up with a scenario in which European game developers are that tiny bit more free, or I guess slightly less restricted by various gameplay mechanics. And I guess that the big players aren't going to develop a game which can be launched in Europe and which can't be launched in the US. That's just not an option. But the indie game developer community in Europe, that might be more of an option. So one prediction for the future might be an increased, I guess, an increased freedom in European indie game devs. Let's see how that turns out. That could be quite exciting for European indie game devs.
Thank you both very much. I don't know whether Tamara or Ben, you'd like to add anything to this, or you'd like to perhaps focus on the next question, if you have any comments on that. And that is on the different kinds of monetization. And do you think that AI can come up with completely unforeseen ways of monetizing gameplay and game interaction? Can you see any upcoming trends in that area?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Michaela. I will take this one if you don't mind. So I fully concur with Scott on the thought that perhaps AI will bring something new in terms of monetization to the video games industry. I will be completely honest, I have never thought about it myself before. I mean, that the AI can come up with the new methods of monetization of video games, but now I think it's totally possible, and perhaps this is something that we will look at in like 3, 5, 7 years time, But if we speak about the short-term perspective and predictions, then coming back to Kosti's question about free-to-play games and whether they will still exist, my guess would be yes. This is the model that will survive for the next, well, a couple of years for sure. And to be honest, there is no contradiction between free-to-play games and subscription. Because the classical subscription, yes, this is when you basically buy the right to use the game during a certain period of time. But the nowadays subscription models, they do exist in free-to-play universe. So the users are able to buy, for example, battle passes, which are essentially subscriptions. And this monetization method, it becomes more and more popular among the players, among game developers and publishers. So I guess that the next developments and the next innovations we will see in the field of subscriptions within the free-to-play models.
I was going to not add to Tamara's great speech on that, but for all those who want to know, at least for the year ahead in the video game industry, E3 is virtual this year, and it's on the 12th through the 15th of June. So if you want to know what the industry is doing in terms of creativity and production of new games, both at the AAA level and the indie level, everyone can tune in to find out what the next great announcement will be from the big players and the small players and everybody in between. So keep an eye on that. I know for our friends in Europe, Gamescom, I think, is also going to be virtual this year, but happening in August, if I'm not mistaken.
Looks like a lot of things will be and remain virtual. And just to really wrap up our great discussion today, because we have 2 minutes left, what I would sum up as really emerging from all your predictions and great comments is that video games are not just games anymore. And as our title of the conference series says, they are more than just a game. They will become everything if they haven't become everything already. And I'm so glad that all of you were able to identify a lot of promises and a lot of positive outcomes that we can be looking forward to. And hopefully we will have the opportunities and the wisdom to support and implement as much as possible, trying to identify any challenges or possible risks at an early stage and address them in a way that is going to be effective and contributes to a metaverse that we all want to live in and we will all enjoy living in, whether it will be governed by humans, machines, or anywhere in between. And with those words, I just wanted to say towards the end that towards next year, we are gearing up for finally More Than Just a Game in London, in person, and all the materials and all the insights and the great contributions that we've had through our online events will be posted on the website where you will be able to find out all about it. And hopefully we will see you all there. Wherever you are, you will come to London and we finally meet, not on Zoom, but in a real room, which would be absolutely great. Thank you so much for coming today, for being here today, and for sharing your predictions with us. And in 5 years' time, we're going to have a recap. We will look back and see how much of what you predicted has actually happened, and whether you were spot on. There might even be a prize in it. Thanks so much for being here, and have a great evening or morning, or afternoon, wherever you are, and hopefully see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.